There are moments when life seems stitched together by an invisible thread, encounters that defy logic, connections that arise from nothing and insist on remaining, even against all odds. It is in this mysterious territory between chance and choice that the idea of destiny is born. When two souls are meant to meet, something greater than conscious will steps onto the stage, a silent dance guided by unconscious forces, synchronicities and archetypes that shape each individual's path. In this video, we will dive into Carl Jung's profound perspective to understand how destiny truly unfolds between two people. Prepare to recognize the hidden signs, the inevitable challenges, and the inner processes that reveal whether this meeting is, in fact, unavoidable. If you believe nothing happens by chance, comment below. I am open to the encounters life wants to show me. For Jung, meaningful encounters are not mere coincidences, but expressions of a principle he called synchronicity, events linked not by cause and effect, but by meaning. When two people are destined to meet, their union does not occur solely on the rational plane. It springs from deep psychic forces, manifested through symbols, dreams, and repeating patterns in reality. Truly transformative relationships activate the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming who we really are. In this context, the other is not merely a partner but a mirror of the unrecognized parts of ourselves. This brings us to the concept of projection. Often, what we love or hate in another is actually an unintegrated aspect of our own psyche. The experience of destined love often demands a confrontation with one's own shadow, the repressed contents that, when they emerge in the relationship, invite us to heal and evolve. In this sense, destiny is not something passive that simply happens. It is an active journey of self-knowledge in which love becomes an instrument of integration. Jung also addressed the presence of the animus and anima archetypes, the internal masculine and feminine aspects within each person. The other may represent this archetype in our life, activating not only desire, but an archetypal quest for wholeness. When the relationship aligns with this principle, it becomes inevitable, not because it is easy, but because it is essential for the soul's fulfillment. If this connection is truly part of your path, destiny will not only bring the right person, but will also bring forth the version of yourself that is ready to receive them. When two people cross paths unexpectedly and instantly feel that there is something greater between them, what is at play is not merely physical attraction or emotional affinity. According to Jung, these intense and almost inexplicable sensations are manifestations of the unconscious, which uses a symbolic language to guide the individual toward what is necessary for inner growth. Love, when it feels destined, is in fact a psychic summons, and the encounter is only the surface of a profound movement. This symbolic language appears in subtle ways, recurring dreams, repeating patterns, unlikely coincidences, and even a sense of recognition when looking into the other's eyes. It is not uncommon for someone to say, "It feels like I've known this person before." In analytical psychology, this can be interpreted as the activation of archetypal images, universal contents of the human psyche, that emerge at decisive moments in life. One of the most potent modes of symbolic manifestation is in dreams. When someone begins to dream of a mysterious figure bearing traits of the idealized masculine or feminine, Jung would interpret that figure as a representation of the animus or anima, the unconscious aspects of the opposite sex present in everyone. When in real life, someone appears who resembles that inner image, the unconscious stirs, and the experience of the encounter takes on almost mythical contours. It is not just a person, it is the embodiment of something that has long inhabited the soul. Projection plays an ambiguous role here. On one hand, it allows us to love because we place in the other qualities we long to develop. On the other hand, it pulls us away from reality, because we see not who the other truly is, but what they symbolize. In the case of destined love, this projection is not a mistake. It is a key. The unconscious projects precisely so that we can find the parts of ourselves that were forgotten. It is as if the other carries fragments of our own soul. There is also the phenomenon of symbolic repetitions. For example, over the course of life, someone may always encounter people with the same name, the same story, or the same emotional pattern. These repetitions are not coincidences, but the unconscious's insistence, trying to bring into awareness a pattern that needs integration or transformation. When you finally meet someone who either breaks that pattern or represents it in a more conscious way, you may feel that, this time, it's different. This too can signal a destined encounter, not because everything will be perfect, but because the soul is prepared to engage with it more deeply and authentically. Moreover, the body also responds to symbolic language. Goosebumps, intense physical sensations, sudden intuitions, these are psychosomatic responses from the unconscious. The body speaks what the mind has yet to understand. When an encounter moves our being profoundly, the body gives clear signs: trembling, warmth, a sense of familiarity, or unexplainable discomfort. We must learn to listen to these signals attentively. The symbolic language of love encounters also appears in the environment. A song playing at the exact moment, phrases repeating, symbols that emerge in common between the two, these are fertile ground for the collective unconscious to manifest. It is as if the external world begins to mirror the internal world, creating a bridge between the visible and the invisible. And it is precisely this bridge that points to a greater purpose behind the meeting. In the end, symbolic language does not serve to predict the future of a relationship, but to illuminate the present. When you realize that an encounter touches layers far deeper than personality, you can understand that love is not just an emotion, it is an archetypal summons. Destiny in this context is not a fixed point on the horizon, but a process that unfolds when the soul is ready. And the unconscious's language is the trail that guides us along this path. Every truly deep relationship will inevitably awaken the shadow. For Carl Jung, the shadow consists of all aspects of personality that we reject, deny, or are unaware of within ourselves. It includes both traits considered negative and unrealized potentials. When two people come together at an intimate, emotionally meaningful level, the psychic field formed between them activates unconscious contents that were dormant. This awakening can be delightful, but also painful, because it requires confrontation, mirroring, and transformation. At the beginning of a relationship, it is common for only the luminous aspects to be projected onto the other. Passion tends to create an idealized image that obscures what is real. However, as intimacy deepens, what was repressed by the psyche begins to surface. The shadow then manifests through jealousy, resentment, insecurities, old fears, or repetitive patterns. This movement is not a mistake, it is an essential part of the individuation process. True love not only comforts, it reveals. In destined relationships, this shadow activation intensifies because the meeting occurs not only to share affection, but to promote psychic growth. The other in this context becomes a precise mirror that reflects with clarity everything that still needs inner work. Anger we feel may be anger we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. The control we criticize may be our own need to dominate. The fear of abandonment may echo old wounds that have not healed. When the shadow manifests, love becomes a laboratory for the soul. The initial tendency is often to project that shadow onto the partner, blaming them for everything that disturbs us. This is an unconscious defense mechanism. Yet according to Jung, the real work begins when we stop projecting and turn inward, asking, "What does this say about me?" This act of reclaiming the projection and examining what it reveals about one's own psyche is the beginning of inner alchemy. The other ceases to be blamed and becomes a portal to self-awareness. The shadow also reveals itself in painful repetitions. When we find ourselves attracted to people who awaken the same conflicts, provoke similar reactions, or reinforce familiar wounds, the unconscious is crying out for attention. It is not bad luck. It is the shadow seeking recognition. The relationship then becomes an amplified mirror that shows what alone we might never have the courage to see. And that is precisely why some encounters feel inevitable. They are not for immediate pleasure, but for the soul's maturation. In deep relationships, mutual acceptance of the shadow becomes a crucial step. It is not about fixing the other, but acknowledging that both light and darkness coexist within each of us. Intimacy deepens when there is space to be imperfect, to reveal fragility, insecurities, and contradictions. This shared vulnerability strengthens the bond and allows love to become not an escape from suffering, but a safe space where suffering can be transformed. The shadow also has a creative function. When recognized and integrated, it unleashes immense psychic energy. Vitality returns, spontaneity expands, and the relationship gains a new level of authenticity. It is as if, by ceasing to hide who we are, we make room for the other to be who they truly are. The connection stops being a performance to please and becomes a living space for two beings in constant transformation. Therefore, relationships that involve destiny are not necessarily the easiest. On the contrary, they are often the most challenging precisely because they touch deep areas and demand emotional honesty. But it is within these bonds that the true potential for healing resides. By integrating the shadow, we transform love into a path of individuation where every conflict ceases to be a threat and becomes an opportunity for growth. The shadow, then, is not the enemy of love. It is its initiator, inviting us to leave illusion behind and come into contact with reality, with the other, and above all, with ourselves. And it is in this space, where love meets truth, that destiny truly begins to unfold. According to Carl Jung, every human carries within them the psychic image of the opposite sex. In a man, this image is the anima. In a woman, it is the animus. These figures are not merely cultural or social ideas, but deep archetypes that influence how we relate, love, and search for meaning. In the context of relationships, especially those marked by a feeling of destiny, the activation of these archetypes is intense and often transformative. The other seems not just a person, but the personification of a part of our soul that lay dormant. The animus and anima form from childhood experiences with the opposite sex. Combined with collective unconscious influences, they contain both light and shadow aspects, and they operate silently in the psyche's backstage. When a relationship awakens these figures, the bond acquires an archetypal depth. It is not merely a link between two egos, but an internal homecoming to forgotten aspects of psychic wholeness. In a man, the anima may manifest as a charming, mysterious, intuitive, sensitive woman, or in its negative aspect, as irrationality, manipulative seductiveness, or emotional instability. In a woman, the animus can appear as a strong, logical, protective, inspiring man, or in its shadow side, as a ruthless critic, mental rigidity, or arrogance. When someone enters our life and fits these internal images, the attraction is overwhelming. It is as if we finally find something we sought without knowing it. But above all, this encounter is an invitation to inner integration. The most common mistake, however, is believing that the other is the archetype itself. We project our anima or animus onto our beloved, expecting from them all we have yet to develop within ourselves. We idealize, demand, and then feel disappointed. Jung warns that this projection is an inevitable but temporary stage. The real work begins when we realize that what we seek in the other is actually a part of our own soul asking for expression. In destined relationships, the integration of animus and anima happens because the other functions as an activator of these unconscious contents. Coexistence provokes reflections, crises, desires, and discoveries that force us to confront our internal polarities. A woman living with a man who reflects her animus is called to develop her strength, assertiveness, rationality, and presence. A man facing a woman who embodies his anima is summoned to deepen his sensitivity, creativity, intuition, and empathy. This integration does not mean masculinizing the woman or feminizing the man, but allowing complementary aspects to live in harmony within the psyche. When the relationship is a channel for this process, it becomes more than an emotional bond. It becomes a spiritual path. Conflicts between the couple cease to be mere personal differences and instead become opportunities for inner growth. The other thus ceases to be the problem and becomes a disguised teacher. It is common in this type of bond for meetings and partings to repeat over time. This happens because the unconscious uses the relationship as a dynamic field of transformation. Separation may be necessary for the person to find within themselves what they are still projecting, and reunion may arise when that integration advances. This back-and-forth movement, far from signaling instability, often reflects the deep rhythm of individuation. Integrating animus and anima requires the courage to stop idealizing and begin seeing, to see the other as they are, but also to see oneself more deeply. In this process, love becomes more real, less needy, and more present. Dependence diminishes because one learns to find within what was once sought outside. Paradoxically, when this interiorization occurs, the external bond strengthens because it is no longer a necessity, but a conscious choice. Thus, in relationships that feel destined, the true purpose may not simply be staying together, but allowing each person through the other to find themselves. The animus and anima are the messengers of this journey, figures that once recognized and integrated transform love into a path, the other into a mirror, and destiny into the expression of an awakened soul. There are encounters that transcend logic and seem orchestrated by something greater. Two people cross paths in improbable circumstances, share similar symbols in their life stories, or meet repeatedly even when they try to follow different directions. For Carl Jung, these phenomena are expressions of synchronicity, a principle that connects events without apparent causal relation, but with a deep, revelatory meaning. When love manifests under the sign of synchronicity, it is not a simple coincidence. It is a sign that the collective unconscious is at work. The collective unconscious, a fundamental concept in Jungian psychology, is the deepest layer of the human psyche, where universal archetypes shared by all humanity reside. It is in this symbolic and timeless space that life's most significant experiences, birth, death, rebirth, and love, are set against their backdrop. When two people meet synchronously, their unconscious minds recognize something their egos do not yet understand. The encounter is both individual and universal. Synchronicity manifests in many ways: a dream of someone who appears the next day, the repetition of a name or symbol across different contexts, chance meetings in unlikely places, inexplicable feelings of familiarity, or deep connection at first contact. Jung observed that these occurrences intensify when a person is in a psychic transition, when the soul is ready for a new stage of individuation. Love in this scenario does not arise to fill a void, but to activate this new cycle of transformation. In destined relationships, synchronicity is not only the beginning, it continues to operate throughout the journey. Small events gain symbolic meaning, time seems to conspire, external happenings reflect internal dilemmas. It is as if the outer world responds to the soul's movements. This perception is not mysticism in a trivial sense, but a profound way of listening to reality as a mirror of the psyche. Jung argued that the universe is not a blind mechanism, but a symbolic field where matter and spirit intertwine. Recognizing signs from the collective unconscious requires sensitivity, presence, and openness to the symbolic. Instead of seeking rational explanations for everything, one must learn to decipher the meanings events carry. A song playing at the right moment, a phrase repeating in different conversations, a déjà vu sensation. These can all be expressions of the archetype acting in experience. When love is born in this symbolic field, it carries a sense of inevitability, not as a prison, but as the soul's call to something greater than the ego can comprehend. It is important to remember that synchronicity does not guarantee emotional security or relationship stability. It signifies meaning, not permanence. A deeply synchronous encounter may last days or decades. Its value lies in the transformation it provokes, the revelation it offers, and the opening of a new psychic space. In some cases, the relationship solidifies. In others, it only prepares the inner ground for something yet to come. Destiny, in this context, is not a straight line but a spiral, and each turn has its function in the being's maturation. Synchronous encounters are invitations to consciousness, to listening to symbols, to reading life as a living narrative. When one accepts this invitation, the relationship is lived with depth and reverence. Every difficulty becomes a message, every separation a lesson, every reconciliation an expansion. The other ceases to be just a partner and becomes a co-creator of destiny, and love ceases to be a need or an ideal, becoming instead a sacred experience. Awareness of synchronicity in love also strengthens trust in life. Instead of living in anxiety to control the future, one learns to perceive the signs along the path, to respond to what emerges, to accept mystery as part of the journey. Encounters that destiny designs need not be forced. They present themselves when the unconscious is ready, when the soul is mature, and when the ego makes room for something greater to manifest. Thus, recognizing synchronicity is recognizing love as part of an archetypal process, and living that love consciously is allowing destiny to fulfill itself, not as an imposition, but as the realization of what the soul has always known. Relationships that seem written between the lines of time are not mere coincidences. They are living expressions of the unconscious, manifestations of destiny acting through symbolic language, shadow activation, animus and anima integration, and synchronicity phenomena. As Jung taught us, the true encounter does not occur just between two people, but between two souls, ready to mirror, challenge, and transform one another on the path of individuation. More than asking whether you are with the right person, perhaps the deeper question is, what is this relationship showing me about myself? For it is precisely here that destiny is fulfilled, not as a fixed script, but as a process of revelation and integration that transforms love into a psychic journey. If this content resonated with you and touched something within, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to receive more reflections like this. And don't go yet. Click the video on your screen now to continue diving into the mysteries of the soul and psyche. Remember, every true encounter is also a reunion with yourself. Destiny begins within.